recording out.
Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, the Quiet Warrior. Not so quiet today, everybody. I would just say theintegritycenter.com. Ha, what is that? Well, we're going to tell you more about that. Hey, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. This is the next generation of podcasting. It's actually a live stream. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. And do me a favor, give a like to my feeds, particularly the YouTube feed, so we can build the audience and honor our guest show today. What we're doing is taping live. We'll be releasing this as a podcast and as an international YouTube premiere. Lots of fun stuff that's ahead of us. So stay right till the very end, everybody. But I'm going to just tell you a bit about the guest. He's in the green room. I have to get ready to use the terminology today. His name's Jeremy Chapman, but I call him Dutta. The Duct is in the house, and I'm going to just talk more about that. But here's a little bit about it. I asked him, about sort of what's your deal, what's your story. As you know, people come on, we tell stories, but we look for the gut punches, the things along the way that are challenges. And Jeremy wrote this to me. I'm just reading off the screen here. He says, I think we have been on similar journeys. I also have a military family background. My pain was not from within the family, but rather from leaving them at age 11. Went to boarding school, blah, blah, blah. And he says, I got my head down, aimed high. I skipped a bunch of stuff because we'll get him to tell us more about that. He is a research fellow with the UNESCO Futures Literacy Finance Chair at the École des Ponts Business School. I don't even know if I said that right. It's in Paris. And Futures Fellow at Hawkwood College, Stroud. He'll tell us more about all that. He just completed his doctoral degree at Middlesex University in London. Pretty excited to be having the doctor in the house. Let me bring on now to the screen Dr. Jeremy Chapman. Doc, welcome to the show, man.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, you got that funny accent. Where are you sitting right now?
Well, right now I'm in the south of Europe, south of Germany, actually, in Heidelberg. I live between the UK and Germany. My wife's German. So the funny accent is an English one.
Yeah, I love it. And as my followers know a bit about my background, I was born somewhere in England there. And when I came, actually, Jeremy, when I came to this country, my dad had reel-to-reel little tapes and had a very thick English accent. Gosh, it's gone. And what is it about infomercials and things when they use your accent? It just makes it more believable.
That's I can't answer that one.
We need to use scientific proof and track that or something. That's too funny. Hey, listen, we're going to start the show out. You're going to see me doing some things in the studio. We'll edit all that out, but I want to put on a bumper music as we get into the first segment, okay? So this segment is called Plato's Garden. You might be familiar with that terminology. Let me just start put something on the screen here. All right, so we're going to put us on the side. All right. Can you see that there? You've got something that you're looking at. It's a PowerPoint. All right. Yeah. So just let me set this up. You be silent, and then I'll introduce, and we'll get rolling. So stand by. In 3, 2, 1. Okay, welcome to Plato's Garden. And listen, you've just finished your degree at Middlesex University. You're familiar with this, but for the audience who are watching, let me just set this up, everyone. If you're listening, you'll hear me. If you're watching, you'll see a PowerPoint. We're in Plato's Garden, and Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece, founder of the Platonist school of thought and academy, the word academia, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. And there's 3 words I want you to put in your mind, Jeremy. One is knowing, one is being, and one is doing. So let's talk about a concept called criticality. In Plato's Garden, if you just remember the picture you just saw, picture back then, Plato they were walking and talking and educating and learning, with his pals. Criticality is to seek and facilitate a deeper engagement with the objects of knowledge. That was a quote from Plato. Being critical pulls different perspectives together, considers them in the light of various contexts and in the light of each other. When we do 360-degree criticality, we're building awareness of ourself in relation to others, like the society and cultural things, to ideas and to context. Criticality, as they call it, Jeremy, can be seen as a critical quality, nature, or state. So here we go. So why we go into Plato's Garden is the perfect place to start and tell your story. There's 3 questions on the screen there, and I think you're familiar with these, but for the audience, everybody, what we're looking at is really looking at the macro level, which is the world around Jeremy when he started his agency or creating his public work, which he'll tell us about. Meso, the second question, is really about his industry, what he was doing and what was going on in his industry. Micro is about the man. So, Jeremy, we're just going to jump all over the place here, but why don't we get into your story? Let's start by talking about question number 1. If you can just read it out loud and then start there and just talk about what was kind of happening around you in the world and take us back where it all started as you began sort of forming the stuff that you do.
Well, in terms of the macro of my thesis and my public works, so specific to that, this journey that you're also commencing, Tom, I guess it started from, as you alluded to earlier, a military background. And I think what that did for me, I realize now, is gave me a certain independence very early on, because I left home at the age of 11. And that was quite a wrench. It's pretty tough. On the one hand, I figured it would be the best adventure ever. And then as soon as I saw my parents driving off in the car, I sort of crumbled into a big heap and thought, what on earth have I done? And I'll never forget that day. And yet from that came the emergence of a stronger person who was certain in terms of what he wanted to do. And actually from that hop and skip from education, it was getting out there in the world and, frankly, earning money. That's what I wanted to do. My father was a big advocate of this. You know what? You need to get out there, get your head down, get a job and earn some money, and then earn more money. And actually, I really wanted to do that. And that's where it all started.
That's amazing. So listen, everybody, we're just going to honor you, Jerry. I mean, telling us at age 11 that you kind of you left home, that's a big step. It's showing some vulnerability there. Let me just riff on that with you. So a little bit about your dad. What did your mom and dad, what was their professions, or were they both working and you were 11 at the time? You were living in England?
Yeah, so the same as your background. My dad was in the military. He was in the Royal Air Force, and I was born in Singapore. Then we moved back to the UK, and then in my formative years, we were actually out in Germany for nearly 5 years.
Yeah.
And because he was moving around quite a bit, a lot of my contemporaries at the time were going to boarding school. They had to go to boarding school, but actually I didn't, because my parents were then settled in Lincoln, but it was my choice to go. And I figured, you know what, it's time to go. I'm going to push out and get on with it. What was going on in the world right then, in the UK and internationally, it was the Falklands War. So we transitioned into that. As I was at boarding school, my dad went down after the war had finished to build the military presence there on the Falkland Islands.
Yeah.
And in government, we had Mrs. Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher, who was very much the wanton capitalist.
They call her the Iron Lady, I think, right?
Yeah, very much the Iron Lady, built on foundations of what happened really with the Falklands War as well, where it sort of galvanized the country at the time. But she was very much for empowering individuals to get out there, get off their backsides, in her words, and get out to work. And she encouraged that. And actually, for me, that was a fairly big thing. I mean, it was a little bit blinkered, I think, the vision in terms of the wider narrative of what that all meant. But to me at the time, it was a big encourager.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm just making some notes in the studio here on my pad of paper, and I wrote down "get off your backsides." I'm coining phrases here from the great Dr. Jeremy Chapman. And it's
You'll
funny.
learn a lot from me, Tom.
Absolutely, I already am, man. Uh, the thing is that here's your. So if we play it back, everyone, here's a man whose father was in the military, and you had to go to boarding school, but dad had this thing, get out there, make money. And then Thatcher was in power in the world, and she was like, "Get off your backside, go go work and make some money." It's kind of interesting, that parallel. Well, what was happening with your mom back then? Was she working, or?
Yeah, my mum was and is the best mother,
Yeah,
and she was very much focused on me and my younger brother.
yeah,
So for her, undoubtedly as well, it was a big wrench to allow me to leave home.
absolutely. Yeah,
But at that time, she was very much looking after us, and because my brother then followed me to boarding school, albeit to a different one. And then my mum returned to work actually, and she ended up working at a university and only retired a few years ago. I mean, she's 80 now, and she was
wow.
working into her 70s. So yeah,
Well, we're gonna honor your mom here. 80 years old. Give her a little bit of applause. That's fantastic. My
sure,
mom
right.
was in my mom's in her 80s. Health isn't that great, but I'll tell you, Jeremy, with the longevity, and I spent 7 or 8 years in the insurance industry as a CEO of an insurance company. You get to see all those tables, actuarial tables, life expectancy. Things have changed, man. We were talking about that the other day, my wife and I,
Mm,
that when you retire at 65, some people retire at 65, and you live till 90, you got to find 25 years of stuff to do. So let's maybe let's just take off on that point. I'll put back on the screen here the Plato's Garden questions. Where do you want to dive into? Let's dive into the mezzo. So we understand a little bit about your early days, what was going on in the world, Margaret Thatcher, the Falklands. What about industry? So get us into that part of your story. I think you wanted to make money. I read your note to me, and you said you thought it was what you needed to do. But talk about that. So you're 11, and then eventually you get into some type of work in industry. Just take us through that journey.
sure. Well, one thing you don't know about me is that I didn't go to university. At the age of 18, I finished my A levels. These are the entry exams for university, and I had a place in London.
Yeah,
But actually, I decided not to bother doing that. It was a business studies degree, and instead, I got a job with a life insurance company in Cambridge. So jumped off the metaphorical bus that was traveling to London, as
yeah.
it were, and started working in Cambridge instead. And thought, well, I don't. I left. I've lived away from home for years anyway. Why do I need to do a degree? I'm going to start working. So that's where it all started.
And
Um,
were you single at the time?
yeah, sure,
Yeah,
sure. So I was 18, 19.
yeah,
And I remember quite vividly months after starting this job in the office, seeing the guys come in, the sales guys in their nice suits and seemed to be really popular with their company cars. There was me sat, anchored to a desk. And I thought, you know what, I do not want to do this. I want to do what these guys are doing. And that's where it then all started. I'd mapped out uh, what I wanted to do. Ahead of that, actually, I was toying with the idea of joining the Air Force, doing what my dad did, but not. He was in engineering.
yeah.
I wanted to be a pilot, but
Mm,
I think the more I moved towards commerce, the more I realized I don't like being constrained, and
yeah.
the military ideology of following orders. I've always felt a need to be free, and if I'm restricted by rules that I don't necessarily agree with, that's a little bit problematic for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Let me just jump in there and riff on that with you. So it's interesting because I was reflecting on the fact that you're 19, man, and I study neuroscience. It's part of my interest. Many of my followers know I fell on my head in 2018 in a bathtub, I was doing a 2-day ride for cancer on my bike and happened to have a shower, fell on my head, broke my fall, and literally almost killed myself. So
Wow.
I broke my brain. I still have double vision and some light sensitivities called photophobia. But man, I went through depression. I had to fix my gait, my walk. My speech was latent. I started learning about the power of the brain. And one of the things that it was so obvious, Jeremy, I'd like to get your perspective when I give it back to you, but we don't we don't actually become adults until the age of 25, which means the prefrontal cortex, which allows you to pause and say, I don't think I'm going to go to university. I think I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to do that. At that age, we just don't have the capacity with that frontal lobe to really rationalize and do critical thinking. So, like many, I'm fascinated by your story. I love your stories. You basically followed your gut, followed your emotions, went into this insurance. I wrote a note on my paper here. Glenn Gary Ross. Did you ever see that movie?
Yeah, for sure I did. That was just,
God.
and that's how it was in my business for
Yeah.
sure at the beginning, and how it's evolved.
Yeah.
I've been tethered to. I wear different hats, but
Yeah.
they're all tied together, I
Yeah.
suppose, with this word integrity, which we'll talk about later. But I'm still within the financial services industry. I have a closed book of clients I look after. I consider them as friends now. But the evolution of the industry from Glengarry Glen Ross type
Yeah.
mentality through to where we are today, which is very heavily regulated, they're poles apart. It's like day and night.
Absolutely. And thinking back to that movie, though, and just thinking about at your age and being in maybe even like a sweatshop type environment, and then you don't like rules. Gosh, I can see, I can already feel you in that story and the rebellious you. My background, as you know, was I spent a third of my career in banking. So in Canada, you're most likely familiar with the landscape here, even if you don't work here. I grew up. My first job, didn't go to university. Same thing. My story was a little bit different. Dad was a drunk and in the military, but he left home, and I was forced to really go out and find mentors, guys like you, to learn from. Went in and got a job as a teller. I remember back then there was no computers, so here I am. We're playing Monopoly money in this training center. Back then there was segregation. Everything was separate. So banks were savings and loans primarily. Wealth management under the charter, the Bank Act. You couldn't get into that business. Had to be a wall between it. Today, it's like a will and estate planning and wealth management services and financial planning. It's all under this big umbrella. So I'm really honored to have you on the show. When we get into integrity and things, it'd be interesting if you talk to us about that in the context of your industry too. So let's pick it up again. Everybody, just telling you here, we're with Dr. Jeremy Chapman. He's with us from Germany. He lives a little bit in Germany, has a home in the UK. And today's show is all about, well, the word integrity. We're in Plato's Garden. And in Plato's Garden, we're talking about the macro, the meso, and the micro. We're connecting the dots, doing all this critical thinking. So, Jeremy, you've told us about your story and as a young guy going up into industry. Now we're at that point where you took us into the insurance industry, and there you were, and you wanted to do something else. Get into now that next chapter of the story. They call it your agency, I think. Basically, this is the beginning of starting something in the world. And I'm always fascinated with the hero's journey narrative, why people wake up and say, you know what, I'm tired of all this pain and all this frustration in my life, or whatever the reason is. It triggers them to go out and do something to make an impact in the world. So take us into that.
Sure. I think it started from, as I already mentioned, seeing the guys coming in with their company cars and the suits, and I wanted a bit of that, and I was very impatient to get going in that respect, and ended up meandering around to get the job I wanted to get, and eventually got into sales, and and I was attached to actually the estate agency arm of the insurance company at the time.
Yeah.
And within a couple of years, I was the top sales guy. And that sort of ran its course when I was in my mid-20s. And I moved across to one of the big British international banks and climbed up the ladder.
Which bank was that?
This was NatWest Bank,
Gotcha.
National Westminster.
Thank you.
And it was there that I really established what I wanted to do, and that was to advise private clients, specialize in investments. And I met my now business partner at NatWest Bank, and we set up on our own now 24 years ago, in fact,
Wow.
the year 2000. And by then we'd sort of honed our abilities, our craft, and we felt we were good enough to go on our own, and we did. And it's been a great success, actually.
That's wonderful. Can you get into just briefly that your partner, if you're comfortable mentioning names, it doesn't matter, but I'm always curious what makes people successful in business working together. It's not that easy working with someone else. There's trust has to be built, but how did you guys meet, or her, and what's the background on that?
Well, we met at the bank, and we got on well socially and business-wise. We did the same. We had a similar approach. And we agreed at outset the terms of business. So it wasn't this sort of euphoric commencement of an entity. We sort of laid down the rules, and that was that we would have our business, but because we were very much in sales at the beginning, that we wouldn't just pool resources. What he earned, he kept. What I earned, I kept. And it was almost a marriage of convenience, which worked very well and generally still works well today, because there's almost a firewall in as much as we're not desperately relying on each other. To feed ourselves. We're independent under that one umbrella. And I think that sort of confidence to do it that way was a really important factor.
Congratulations on that. I wrote some email website addresses down here when I was doing research on you. What are we talking about now? There's like money.co, there's honestly.co, there's VC. Which one would be relevant to mention?
I'm a prolific website holder, designer. Yeah. So the core business is Sycamore Alliance, which is a limited company in the UK, and this is the core business of ours. And from that, I have other interests and entities, but that's my core wealth management business, which, as I've said, still exists. Has actually been this was the main public work. So for your audience, I've just completed my professional doctorates, where I've been able to critique or ask questions of why and the reasons how I created works that are in the public domain. And one of those is Sycamore Alliance, my wealth management business. And I've really been able to unpick the decisions that I made in terms of establishing it.
Yeah, I'm just putting something up on the screen here. We can look at this together. I'm just going to put it on there. We'll edit and tidy it up. What a beautiful web. There it is. So that's the core, kind of the core business. And if I scroll down, it says what we do. Just very quickly, give us a soundbite. You can even use this for marketing purposes as we release. So what it says about us, advice, and the services.
Yeah, so we're in the main, we're private client wealth managers. We're affiliated to the UK's largest wealth manager, which is called St James's Place. So we're considered a senior partner practice with St James's Place, mainly because we've been with them for so long.
Yeah.
And in the main, we're advising in terms of accruing wealth. So
very cool. There you are. And, we could probably have you back in another show, because I'm fascinated. Look, we're in the middle of a war somewhere in Europe, and we've got just chaos in the world, and the financial impacts, all of that. I can't imagine being in your shoes or in your team's shoes, advising clients, dealing with things, especially going through times like that. Did you go through in your career? Did you go through those? I guess you did, right? Those cycles where you had the financial collapses along the way.
Yeah, for sure. Several, and there'll be many more ahead, I'm sure. Markets tend to be very cyclical.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to talk the talk when markets are stable or moving upwards, but it's a whole different thing to deal with that when markets are going against you. And you need some sort of confidence in terms of your narrative, but
Yeah.
also to have pre-handled that at the beginning. The reality is, if we're dealing with managed investments, which is what we're doing, then markets will always go against you at some point. And part of the story is dealing with pre-handling that as an issue. And this loops back to integrity again, how we make use of that word. And that in itself, I think it diminishes the uncertainty. If we hold on to it enough and we understand it and we deal with it for the right reasons, then it can dispense with the uncertainty of dealing with situations that you've just mentioned.
Interesting. Everybody, just a shout out again. We're with Dr. Jeremy Chapman. He just completed his doctorate at the Middlesex University in London. That we'll get into graduation, what that appeared like later on in the show. We're in Plato's Garden, and in Plato's Garden, we're talking about the big picture, why he went into the career he did. Let's turn the corner now and open it up. There's something on the screen there. If people are watching, I've got the integritycenter.com. It's scrolling on the bottom. And let's kind of be sitting here curiously waiting about what's this integrity thing all about. So set the stage for us. You start your doctoral degree. Tell us the year and time you started that. Why did you do it? And then here you are, a wealth or money manager, et cetera, and you start diving into this doctoral that results in this thing about integrity. Go for it. Oh, I think you might have frozen there. Are you back?
No, I'm here. I can see you. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we're back now.
Great.
Just frozen. Okay. So let's 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, great. So look, this story started about 12 years ago, where I started to ask serious questions about what I was doing. And that actually was on the back of a very successful trading year. And yet, almost counterintuitively, I felt a disconnect, that something wasn't quite aligned. And that started a journey of asking questions of what I was doing and why, my purpose, and then a move into experimenting with other businesses. And that's ultimately led me to where I'm at today, which is commencing and completing the doctoral journey, starting a not-for-profit, and pushing out and giving more rather than just thinking about myself, but also reframing how I run my wealth management business.
Let me just jump in there. You said something insightful. Get us into your tummy, into your emotion. You said something wasn't quite right. What exactly are you talking about? What was going on in you? What was that?
Well, there was a feeling of disconnect. There's a misalignment. And to drill down on that a little bit more, superficially, everything was perfect, but my interactions with the functioning of the wealth management machine that I was attached to felt really frustrating. And it was only through detaching and reflecting on what I'd been doing, and actually with the help of a business coach, which I'd encourage anyone to engage with. And I worked out back then, Tom, that I'd achieved what I set out to achieve. So at the age of 18, when I started working, I was on a journey. I didn't quite know where I was going, but it actually was to accrue sufficient to give me a feeling of, I've got a platform now, that I can kind of, I feel I have my feet on solid ground. And actually that was enough to then catalyze a different way, an experimentation. And through that and asking questions of what I've done, the golden threads that I've learned through my the critique of my work through the Middlesex University doctorates, the golden thread is integrity and how I use integrity. And that's self-leveling, because there was a point within my career where I felt quite afraid within the machine, which might have been a little bit irrational.
Tell us about that, Jeremy. Dive into what were you afraid of? What was going on specifically?
Okay, so the wealth management industry in the UK, and I'm sure it's very, very similar in Canada, is a very heavily regulated machine, because it needs to be, because you're dealing with people's futures. You're dealing with money they've accrued. There needs to be a heavy emphasis on expertise and trust. but equally, the organization you're attached to typically is focused on growth and more growth. There's this notion of growth in motion, perpetual and upwards. And back in the day, if one was not delivering in terms of GDP growth, so percentage growth in monetary terms, then pressure was applied.
Mm.
And 12 years ago, I decided I wanted to reimagine how I was doing business, and pressure was applied on me to comply. I liken it to a herd of wildebeest, and
Okay.
I suddenly was this sort of stray one that peeled off.
Mm.
And I think it was Jordan Peterson that said this, that if you do this, the lions are waiting, and they'll have you. And they kind of did for me. It was get back in line with the herd. But actually, since then, things have evolved considerably in terms of how we do business, a more inclusive, responsible mindset. Just having growth is typically now insufficient. Then it needs to be wrapped with, in my case, integrity, but many would call this ethics. And we'll get onto that in a minute. And this has been quite self-leveling. And what it's done is dispensed with this fear, because that's not my target. I have my target and I know where I'm going, and I can articulate that quite clearly. It was the machine that was applying pressure, and the machine didn't really understand what I was doing. But now it does. If we loop around on this and drag it to the future, in January of this year, I was awarded by the machine Responsible Business of the Year.
All right,
So
that's fantastic.
there's been a change of mindset. Thanks.
That's
And that tells me that we're moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. You're a very humble man. That's quite an accomplishment. I just want to see if I can put something on the screen here to share so we can show you this. I did a little digging and I found this cool picture.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, I know the audience who's listening can't see the picture, but describe what's happening in that picture.
Well, I look rather like a frightened rabbit because I was totally unexpecting this. I was asked to attend a symposium run by St. James's Place, and I really was struggling to make it because of some academic commitments. And they kept pushing and said, Jeremy, you should really come along. It's really important. Okay, I'll come along. And I sat there at the front, not thinking of other things, when the presentation of the award came about. And Maria, who you and I can see on the screen, was talking about this really interesting sounding chap. I thought, well, wow, I've got a lot in common with this guy. And then all of a sudden I realized it was me, and I really couldn't believe it. And I'm really grateful to receive the award, and it means a lot, actually, and particularly given my journey with them. It's really nice to be recognized.
Yeah. Who's that lady again that's there? Is she from?
So that's Maria Spooner. So she heads up the responsible business team
Gotcha.
at St. James's Place. And I work quite closely with them. They're very open-minded. This is now a major pillar of St. James's Place, who are the largest wealth manager in the UK.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely determined to push in this direction and do the right thing and ask questions of what they've done and where they're going. And the regulator actually in the UK, the Financial Conduct Authority, their number one principle for business is integrity. And interestingly, this is my area of deeper interest and research. And St. James's Place are very much engaging with this now, which is really great to see.
Well, everybody, we're here celebrating an honor, actually. Dr. Jeremy Chapman, we're with him, and he's just holding an award there. Again, what was the award called?
So that's the Responsible Business of the Year award.
Responsible Business of the Year. Congratulations. We'll put up some fireworks there to just get a little excited. I've got a comment that came in on the chat. We're live, and people are watching us in different platforms. Let me see what I can... Okay, somebody just said, hi, how are you? Give us something substantive. Ask the question. I'll post it in the chat. Whoever sent that, thank you very much for engaging. So, Jeremy, going back to let's just add this here, the Integrity Center. You talked about bringing integrity and this whole thing behind your doctoral. Paint the picture a little bit broader. What exactly does this mean?
So it means personally to me everything. But in terms of how it came about, it was a realization through my doctoral research that it's a word, as you're saying on the website there, it's a word that we're all familiar with, but we hold it quite lightly. And I mentioned this on the websites. So what does that mean? It means we all feel we know what it means. But it's actually quite complicated in as much as in our minds, integrity is sort of connected to ethics and principles and morals, and rightly so. But there are significant differences. And it was only through having a deeper dive into my public work and researching and reading numerous academic papers that I realized the golden thread, as I've mentioned before, for me is this word integrity. So what do I mean by that?
Yeah.
Well, it starts with values. We all have values, and where do those values come from? They have a historicity. There's a history attached to them, and that might be the friends we have, our family, books we read, the school we went to, the culture of the country that we live in, and the list goes on. But there's nothing constraining those values. So I could be an angel, and Tom could be a devil. And yet he has values and I have values, and we can say, well, sure, I'm committed to Tom's case burning things and me helping people, for example. And it's only then when we filter through this sort of hierarchy from values to morals to principles that they start to become constrained. And we constrain those values to make them more acceptable to society. And as we move upwards, we get to ethics. And I talking of being doctors, I'm sure it's the case in Canada as well, but medical professionals have a code of ethics that they must adhere to. And one of those rules of the code will be that, for example, they can't have a relationship with a patient. This makes sense, of course. But here's the thing. If an individual doctor does not have integrity, then the code of ethics is meaningless. Now, why is that? Because ethics are an external rule set, whereas integrity is internal. And the roots of the word integrity come from being as one, if we analyze the Latin roots. And this deeper understanding for me of this word, I found fascinating. And, it's something we use in everyday language, but I'm convinced, particularly if I draw a line to my business of wealth management, where the top value, or in the words of the regulator, principle, is integrity. My question was, well, what do we all know what it means beyond doing the right thing and trying to be trustworthy? Well, I think there's a lot more to it. And very simply put, it means that because integrity is something that's internal, we make a deal with ourselves to commit to doing it. And that's not an easy thing. And it's not suggesting that it's perfection. I'm perfect. I'm certainly not. Yep. But I'm holding myself to account. And, what do I mean by that? I mean that I'm asking questions of all the decisions I mean. And back to this sort of being as one, it means, and I draw some lines back to the wealth management industry, and we could probably say this with every industry, that we project a certain persona professionally, and that persona might be quite different from the person that arrives at home at 7 o'clock in the evening, or that goes out with his or her friends at 9 o'clock in the evening to a bar. Yeah. And my theoretical leanings on this are life is better, richer, and simpler if we hold ourselves to account with this rule set of integrity and we project as one person. So whether I'm with my wife or without, at work or at home, I'm constantly working on this challenge of being one person.
I love it. I'm just gonna jump in and riff with you there. Hold that point in the story. It's fascinating. Here we are with Dr. Jeremy Chapman. I've got a question that I'm going to put up on the screen in just a moment. It's from New Zealand. We got Greg Pitcher from New Zealand. How about that? You're in the Germany. I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and here we are, New Zealand's in the house. A few things come to mind. Jeremy, what happens with my brain is as you're talking, it evokes thoughts from my memory, and then I go on this journey in my head. I jump quadrants, and I start having emotions and things. And I was just writing down integrity. And I remember, you're familiar with the man Tony Robbins, who's a world-known motivational speaker, but also he's really an educator. The guy's story is powerful. I remember watching a video that I used in an executive training program I ran for a client, and in that video, I'll never forget it. It said, people will be remembered for what they do in private, not in public. People will be remembered for what they do in private, not in public. And then as I was getting in, I'm an industry executive or CEO by trade, but then I got into my own coaching of others. That's what I do today. Do training programs and things for business. And I come across this word incongruence, and you made me think about that. And that is where exactly what you said, man. And it comes out in coaching in the cone of silence. It's like what some of these people do at the office versus what they do in private are two different things. So incongruence, I think it's fascinating how it's tied to this state of being you're talking about with integrity. Also, I am an author, and I've published a couple books, and I have people on sometimes, and I'll read their books, Jeremy, and I'll read it, and I'll want to do a review and post it for them on Amazon or something. And then once in a while, I get this book, and I read it, and how the person is speaking in the book, and then I do some research. I look at their social media feeds and things, and how they're actually behaving in the world is completely different. It's like, do as I say, not as I do. Here's my framework for integrity. Boom, 5 things. And then I start digging into the character of the person, and they're not living that life. They're telling people, you got to have integrity, and you got me going here on emotion because my 35 years in business, I work for many bosses, and there's some of them who will point to the wall and say, see that chart there, our values and things and integrity? And they have no flipping integrity. I had a boss once, I can't get into the name of the company, but I was 20-something years old. I was running the largest loans portfolio in a large FI here, financial institution, and we had the stock transfer department in the company, in the building. Back then, it wasn't all automated, so people would bring in their stock certificates. And my boss brought down a financial instrument and literally asked me to forge the individual signature because they had forgot. And there was this power struggle. And you talk about integrity. I learned at a young age that word integrity doesn't really mean the same thing to a lot of people. So thanks for letting me go on a little rant. I'll let you catch your breath. Let me put this on the screen here. Greg's saying that how does integrity fit in with intellectual humility? You want to just riff on that? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with it. I think actually I'm going to riff on this.
Please.
This point that you've just raised, Tom, the boss with asking you to forge something, and I think this is a real world example of things that can be going on all the time, and it puts pressure on us, particularly the boss, back down to the worker. And what we do, I think it asks questions of congruency in terms of what the boss is doing. Integrity clearly doesn't exist because we're breaking laws and rules. And I think there's a piece back to values, and when we consider the shaping of values and where they come from, the age in which we live in now very much accelerates more extrinsic values. And by extrinsic, I mean we're looking at traits where individuals want to be admired, they want to have more, and this is the popular narrative in this day and age. But here's the thing: this admiration, this desire to constantly have more and push the boundaries to accrue more for the self, typically leads to more stress and insecurity.
Yes.
And if we flip that to more intrinsic value set, where we're considering longer term societal value, togetherness, communities, self-confidence, then you can see, I think you can draw some lines to the personalities you'd have come across in the past that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And we're talking about personalities, humans, and the frailty of these humans. And of course, we're shaped by pressures of society.
Yeah.
And I really do think that integrity is an important contributor to humility, to being human as well, but also this self-confidence notion, but also beyond that, winding the clock back a little bit in terms of the pressures that we're experiencing in this day and age. I think, I look at my two youngest children as teenagers, and there's an enormous amount of peer pressure and through tech, social media and the like to constantly have more. And your actors with profile in that realm typically are projecting more extrinsic values.
Yeah.
My theories on this are that it doesn't mean you're permanently in a state of locked into being bound by extrinsic values. And one way to shift that value set is through a deeper understanding of what integrity actually means, how you find it, and then how you hold on to it. And I don't have all the answers, but this is one way to ask questions of our existence. And I think it does feed to a strength of agency. Your a certain simmering self-confidence can bubble up by your certainty that you are doing the right thing. And you're doing the right thing because you're holding yourself to account.
Well, that's amazing. And I'm going to just give a little thank you for Greg there. A little applause for his question. And you tied together integrity and the word humility, which I really love. I actually like the depth of your thinking. And I think the word integrity now, I'm going to go away from this and everybody come back and rewatch this. And there's so much wisdom and information that you're hearing here. I think this makes this is going to have a lot of people turning their guts inside out when we think about what you're telling us. Made me think of another quick story I want to share with you. If I had met somebody like you and I had a mentor or had you as my mentor, I guess early in the 80s when I started my career in banking, and then I climbed and got into more senior work like C-level, I probably wouldn't have stayed in that lane. It wouldn't have taken this long to realize that I was living a life and working in an environment that wasn't integrity. Let me tell you why. That two things happened in my life, and this actually is one of the things I'm reflecting on in my own doctoral, which is about this whole integrity thing. I didn't realize till you started talking about it that I'm sort of crossing over into some of the things you're talking about in my own research. But anyway, I was running a company. I was the CEO of the company. It was an American company, Canadian division. It was an insurance company. So we can probably talk about insurance and bore each other to tears sometime. But it was life and health insurance. And there was this initiative where the Canadian company was making money. The American company was actually on this, what they call operational efficiency drive to look at costs, I think financial pressures. And this was an $8 billion company globally. Make a long story short, my division was doing well, and they decided they wanted me to carve out costs. I ended up what I call handing 40 people their future. In other words, I had to fire 40 people, and we were forced to outsource a call center operation to America. And one thing that happened, and this was just around Christmas, is there was somebody in my own business unit that I didn't listen to enough. So I had a boss who was pushing hard on me and putting a lot of pressure on me. And it's funny, Jeremy, because when you start thinking about integrity and making tough decisions to keep integrity, here I am. My daughter's born. Ann and I are now married 28 years. But back then, it was that the timing would have been my first year of marriage. We've got a big mortgage, and like you said, which was brilliant. I'll put in my own words that back then I thought a quality of life equals a quantity of stuff. I just ended up working myself to death. But going through that moment where I listened to feedback in my own business, and there's something wrong with the decision. And all of a sudden I started thinking about myself, I got to pay my bill. There's only so many CEO jobs out there. My daughter's just born, it's private school, all these things we had her in. And I didn't challenge it. And we ended up firing 40 people. I never forget it. Just before Christmas, one woman was young. She had a baby, and I was horrified. I didn't sleep for a week. And the 2-3 weeks after, it all fell apart. What happened was it was proved that outsourcing this center wasn't the right decision. In fact, they weren't ready to take it on because the processes weren't in place. That's story number one. Story number two is, seeing that we're talking about financial services, is I about 15, 17 years ago, it's long behind us. My wife and I were doing well. She's a banker and I was a CEO. We never worried about finances. We're immigrants. She's from Italy. I'm born in the UK, parents from Fiji. And we got caught in a Ponzi scheme. Woke up one day and lost everything, like completely all our financial assets gone. We had to rebuild. And I never forget that the people who introduced us to that concept were actually a couple of seniors who lived kitty corner from our house, who invited us to a presentation one night. And this was all orchestrated through one of our largest banks, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. If you Google IFFL, you might find it. The total take globally was $1 billion and 400 million in North America, Jeremy. And here we were, really smart, what we thought were smart financial people. And when we got caught in it, we were so embarrassed because we're supposed to be advising people. What was driving me during those days was the word significance. So not integrity, but significance. And I'll finish on this. I'm pouring my heart out for a reason here, because what you're teaching us is so important. And I didn't learn it till later in life, that it was about me. It was about more stuff. It was about the big job, the big paycheck, the CEO title and all that. And it wasn't about the word integrity. And the significance just all blew up. How many people out there listening to us have a story like that? And that's why, everybody, we're here with Dr. Jeremy Chapman. The integritycenter.com is the website you can check out. His thesis through his doctoral is about this thing called creating integrity, or making integrity a way of being. I said a lot there. You don't need to respond to all that, but I'll give it back to you if you want to just tell us a few more things about what you're doing.
Sure. I think it speaks to humility. I think it also speaks to assumptions. We take advice from others, and it's how the others and us as well make use of assumptions. And what are we doing when we're making an assumption? Yeah. We're trying to pre-populate the future. Yeah. And if you think about this investment you engage with, or any investment any of us engage with, what we really want is certainty. We're going to get some alpha. That is some growth moving ahead. But here's the thing. It's complex, one, and it's entirely uncertain, two. And whoever tells you you're guaranteed to get this huge amount of growth, this is not factually correct. No one has been to the future and come back again and told us what's going to happen. And if we want evidence of how uncertain the world is, just think back to the pandemic and how this shut us down for a period. We didn't know how to deal with it. Yeah. And I think, this is back to this notion of assumptions again, and making use of the future and asking questions of the assumptions we use. And this is what I do with my colleague, Martin Callanan from École de Pomme Business School in Paris, and he holds the UNESCO chair for futures literacy. And asking questions of how we make use of the future and the assumptions we use is this whole concept of futures literacy, a UNESCO sponsored project. which is another subject entirely, which we won't go into now. But, it is interesting. And I kind of liken those, in management and those in positions of control, we're trying to create certainty when it simply isn't there. And it's getting comfortable with that uncertainty. And that's quite difficult in itself. Because often I liken managers and executives to kids in an egg and spoon race. Do you have this egg and spoon race?
Yeah.
Kids school.
I've done it.
Game. Yeah, summer school games. So what do I mean by that? Well, they're continually running with their own egg to get to their perception of what a good finish line is, and that in your case and mine in the past, Tom, was growth. It's having more. When I get enough, whatever enough is, I will give myself permission to be happy. But you know what? You'll probably never have enough. And actually, when you do have more than you actually need, studies show, and I think you and I are probably evidence of this as well, that it does not make you materially happier. What you typically get a pleasure from doing is engaging with others. It's back to this intrinsic value set again, thinking of we instead of just me, beyond the self. And and I think this is the problem with many. I think you call it the executive's graveyard. They're sort of stuck in this limbo, in the egg and spoon race, continually in motion, and you can't slow them down. And I think one way of doing that is trying to engage and understand what integrity really means. And this then speaks to values and purpose. And so we meander into a different space. And this is what we do at the Integrity Center.
Well, let me just ask this question, then I'm going to put a comment on the screen, and then I have a few quick things to respond to what you said, and then we'll move towards the last segment of the show. This is amazing. I mean, when we do storytelling, time just flies. We're almost at an hour. Can you believe it? And I'm having fun. I hope you are.
Yeah, me too. It's great.
Yeah. So in your work, I saw something. Do you have a framework? Do you have a model or something that you've developed? Can you just tell us about that and where people can find that? So you want to live with integrity. You want to do this thing called make integrity a way of being. What do people look at that you've written, or where they can get that information and really make it a way of their life?
Yeah, so the output is the Integrity Center, but the beginnings of asking questions of this really centered around my application piece for the doctoral program. And this is called Umbrella Money. So the website is live. It's Umbrella Money, as in, the thing that keeps water off of our heads when it's raining, umbrellamoney.co.uk.
I see.
And within there is an articulation of a framework. So Umbrella Money was my application piece, but it's an articulation of how I found balance in life. And I articulate this as an umbrella, which if you view the website, you'll see, and there are different segments of this umbrella. So if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a couple of pictographs. And it's probably a bit higher than that. You'll see that in a minute. But anyway, so in there, this is about finding balance in life. And part of that finding balance, in my case, was very much an understanding, an articulation of, and a commitment to integrity.
I see.
There are other segments to this as well. And again, without going too far off piste, here we go. So part of this is asking questions of our values and purpose. And this feeds to the notion of integrity. It's about balance in life in terms of carving out enough time for the self. And you spoke about this earlier, Tom. Often the error we make in life is we tether ourselves too tightly to the machinations of business. And I think it's really important that we create time for ourselves. We think that this is not just doing social things, but actually looking after the greatest machines we'll ever own. And that means you actually get physically active. You go for a run, a bike ride, whatever. And, I made a commitment 12 years ago that my fitness would be in my schedule on business time. So it's always during the day, and I've always adhered to that. And this is a really important value of mine. And I don't have fear in terms of defending that, because there's a very good reason why I defend it.
Yeah.
Because I want to look after myself. I feel happier, more in control, and therefore I'm really happy to explain that I'm shifting business appointments around that. That's priority, as is family time. And anyway, the umbrella money framework is all about this notion of balance in life, rather than being lost in the machine, as you were and I was in the past. It's signposting how we can get out of the machine, but also how we think beyond the self. And that in turn encourages greater social engagement. Because I think the popular narrative now is that we're thinking only of ourselves. But we can derive a huge amount of pleasure by helping others, by viewing nature, by getting out into nature. And as strange as that may seem, it's so self-leveling when you give yourself permission to do it.
Yeah.
Beyond this, Tom, to very quickly answer your question, yes, the next graphic down below this one you're showing on the screen now is a framework I call PINSA, which signposts integrity as a way of being. And this is the crux of the matter.
That's cool.
So the whole, this emerged from my thesis.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm just going to throw a comment. We'll just digress and throw a comment on the screen before it goes away. Just going back to the conversation we're having, right, about integrity and decision making. So many people, so many companies are laying off people after years of record profits, or they get rid of a current CEO and bring in new ones to lay people off. It's an interesting journey. I got the nickname Tommy Gun because I was a hired gun, go and clean things up, grow right size, and then you end up, you're tossed. My average, if you look at my resume, Jeremy, I've done a lot, man. My average tenure in some of those senior roles was 2 to 5 years. And when the new guy comes in, guess what? He brings his own team, and everything changes again, and different culture changes, different definitions of integrity. Sure. Everybody, we're here with Dr. Jeremy Chapman. He's sharing with us, I have it on screen here, his model for integrity. You see Pincer there. I love, this is so awesome because it's there, it's visual. I'm a visual learner. And I encourage everybody to go to the website that is, we'll put in the show notes, umbrellamoney.co.uk, and you'll find this there. Get a hold of Jeremy and talk to him. Jeremy, I want to say a couple other things. I'm just going to remove that off the screen there. You've been great giving us so much of your time today. I wrote this down as you were talking in the studio. You can see I've got my little pad here, and there's so many notes going. My head is pouring out on my paper, man. And that you're getting the best out of me. I was actually thinking about that umbrella thing you had on the screen there, that picture umbrella, the Brawley. I remember growing up in the UK and the word Brawley. Yeah. And everybody, you don't know this, but when we started the show, Jeremy had behind him a big umbrella. Reminded me of a movie, The Kingsman. Figure that one out, right? Maybe umbrellas would be cool things to have if you're a CEO. You put a poison tip on it. I don't like you. Bang, there you go. Okay, you're gone. I hate to admit this, but in my career, I fired 430 people. Wow. I'm telling you that because that's what the life of a turnaround, fix-it CEO. Now, what I learned is my own personality profile is one of intimacy. I love people, and I get a charge. I basically live through other people. And I was living a life of plenty, but no integrity. And it all changed in 2015 when I started my own platform, my own company and everything, and became an author and do this kind of stuff. Jeremy, you're such a gifted man. You gave us a gift, but that everything you said, I wrote down here, when is enough enough? Everybody just ask yourself that question. When is enough enough? Particularly, we could have you back to talk about mental health, mental illness, and when that brain gets overloaded. Number 2 point, in some of the work I've been doing, there's a Dr. Paul Zak who's written a book called Immersion. He's actually connected to me. We're doing some work together. And one thing you said was so beautiful, but people miss it, is you can't get happiness and joy from the external world. It's actually comes from within. And if we look at neuroscience, Jeremy, I'm just saying this from the audience. I'm not talking to you to tell you. I learned this through neuroscience, that the brain releases a key chemical called oxytocin. Oxytocin is, they call it the love, or Dr. Zak refers it as the love chemical. And guess when that releases, man? When we're doing this.
Mm.
When I'm sitting and sharing stories, having a beer, or going for a bike ride with my pal Jeremy, and he says something, and in the story there's a protagonist, maybe it's his story, then there's an antagonist that appears, and there's a little cortisol and fear, and I'm all alert. And then he gives me hope. He says, look at this thing, Pincer, and this is how I changed my life. I'm teaching people to give back and have integrity and be happier. Now there's this feeling of hope, and guess what? Oxytocin's flowing. All of a sudden, I'm feeling happy and joy. And as you said, you nailed it. I was trying for so long to try and get happiness and joy from material things, from everything I just told you about. And I think people listening to the show will probably be nodding. So, yeah, that's absolutely true. It happens within. Tell me what you think about that. Happiness.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful thing. And hope is a really great word, because no matter where you're at and what you're doing, there's always hope.
Yeah.
And do look at the Umbrella Money sites, because there's a story that's told. And I'm really happy for your listeners to reach out to me. But here's the thing: if we hang our hats on this notion of integrity, I really see there being three big wins for the individual. The first one, that you build trust, not just at work, but with your personal relationships as well, because you're projecting, and you believe in, and you're attempting to assimilate the different parts of your personality to project as one. And therefore, there's this notion of reliability. And I think, it also then, by default, asks questions of what your purpose and values are. And when we honestly, I'll bounce this back to you, Tom, when you were honestly critiquing now your previous role and existence of firing all these 400 plus people, was that really aligned with your purpose and values set? No, because and how did it manifest itself? Because you were feeling stress and anxiety.
Absolutely.
And this is back to this notion of fear I was talking about. So this notion of trust is a very strong platform. And I think it then moves us towards this more intrinsic mindset of old, the talking to your neighbor over the garden fence. How many people do you see walking around like Tom with the big headphones on, glued to their phone, tripping over things? They're shutting out the world. And actually, I'm fearful for the younger generation, because they don't know how to interact with people beyond screens. Anyway, so the notion of trust, I think, is really important. Number two, it's this notion of empowerment. There's a greater awareness of our personal agency, but also our limitations, and we position ourselves accordingly. We're not perfect, but it enables us to deal with challenges, contain stress and fear, and position ourselves accordingly. The last one is this notion of improvement, that we're always striving to ask questions of what we're doing, and this unrelenting commitment to try and do the right thing. This is what integrity means. And that in turn is aligned with our purpose and values, and we're constraining those values with integrity. But I think we get that right as well, and our motivation starts to peak. We notice these spikes. And, I think the overarching question with all of these points I've just been trying to make is then, how do we want to be remembered? Do you want to be remembered as the guy that fired all those people? Or do you want to be remembered as the guy that's engaging with being open and transparent and humble and offering hope and engaging with people? I think that the answer is self-evident. And I think we have it in ourselves. It's down to commitment. We simply need to make that commitment to do.
That's amazing. Everybody, there again, we have on the screen, if you're looking, the award Jeremy just won was Business Entrepreneur of the Year, something to that effect.
Responsible Business of the Year.
Responsible Business of the Year. That is a great award to have on your resume and on your bio, sir, because if I'm wanting to listen to you now, I'm taking you seriously. The man walks the talk. The going back to that thing about firing people, I want to make sure that people don't think I'm that kind of a bad dude. But thinking about what you said, Jeremy, that's interesting because somebody has to do that work. And
Sure.
another story, which I could get into in more detail, which I won't. But I was with a company. It was a large telecom, and the guy who came from the UK actually was hired as a CEO to run it, and they merged it and got into data, internet, cell phones, all this. After spending money like drunken sailors, the stock price of the company fell from $40 to something like $6, and they ended up firing 5,000 people. And I was part of a SWAT team that had to go across the enterprise. Here's the thing about what you just taught us. Tell me what you think. When I look at those diagrams, and it's a beautiful website, everybody, Umbrella Money, go check it out. When I look at what you created with your thesis from your doctoral, that when I think back about those instances, even the one where I talk about the call center, if I do critical thinking, or I do what you said and connect the dots, I think Tim Ingold, who I'm reading now, which I know you know a little bit about, Tim Ingold is an anthropologist and academic guy, everybody. You start connecting all these dots and you start seeing a very different picture. So when I look back at those situations, if I had connected the dots, I probably would have discovered, why are we having to terminate 40 people? And let's re-engineer and let's look back at some of the things that went wrong. And the part about integrity, somebody asked me that. They said, would you do it again? And my thing now is that based on, I've learned a lot from you today, based on the wisdom, I say you fail, you make mistakes, you go through hardship. I'm a faith-based man, so the Lord, Jesus Christ, my Lord, came in my life and put me through some hardships to learn something. And then you come back after that, you're stronger, but you use that wisdom and knowledge. And so after going through what I went through with that call center situation, Jeremy, I'm a stronger man, I'm smarter, I'm tougher. And now if I was in that situation again, I would handle it differently and we would probably have a different outcome. And so for me, integrity would be to tell you today and my listeners that if somebody hired me again to do that exact same job, I would. With integrity, I'll tell you I would go in, because this time I can create a better outcome and share with the world, give back to the world and share my wisdom and knowledge and my level of integrity, which is, no, we're not going to fire 40 people. We're going to inherently look at fixing what's broken and take a different approach. And if you don't like that, you can fire me. I seriously would put myself out there. I would never have done that before without listening to you and what I learned today. Let me go back now and just get into the last segment of the show. This has been just awesome. We're over an hour now, and so it's going to be a great production that we're going to have. Did you know you're getting an award today?
I didn't. No.
Oh, you do now.
Great tell.
Cat's out of the bag. So I've just put on the screen there another camera view. So you're being inducted into what's called the Quiet Warrior community. And so this is an award that when I created the show, and I just want to show you on the camera here, it's actually a challenge coin. Have you heard of challenge coins?
No, I haven't.
Interesting. These actually were created, and there's a little sleeve here that you'll get. So it comes in a little package like that, and it's a coin that's two-sided. These are hand-painted and crafted, minted in America. Sorry, Canada. And they're just beautiful. So I had it designed when I started the show, and in World War I believe, or II, these challenge coins originated, and soldiers would carry them to commit to community, commit to each other. Let's just say you and I decided, okay, we're both going to carry a coin now, and on the front of it, the word integrity. So by carrying it, we commit to each other. No matter what we're doing, we're committed to each other in this language of integrity.
Lovely.
So we have I have maybe 40 of these going out a year, and they're all over. I'm in 17 countries now with the work I'm doing for the show.
Wow.
And it's tough to get this because you have to turn yourself inside out, share your vulnerability, blow up your life, figure it out, create something, and then make an impact in the world, which you, my friend, have done in spades. I'm so proud of you. So the front of it is actually, you can see it there, the actual image of the show.
Great. Look at that. That's wonderful, Tom.
And then the back of it is a hero's journey narrative by Joseph Campbell. It's very intricate, but it's all about the narrative of storytelling.
Lovely.
Which is really how we connect and grew together through the show. So on that note, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm honored. Very kind.
You're going to get that sent to you, and welcome to the Quiet Warrior community.
Fantastic.
Let's give it back to you for the last word. Tell us anything you want to leave us with, any piece of wisdom, where people can get a hold of you. What
Yeah,
what
look,
do you do for fun?
it's been great to be with you for the past hour. Life's a journey. I think we learn from our mistakes for
Yeah.
sure. We got to dust ourselves down and reflect on what we've done,
Yes.
make sense of it, and recycle that. But I really do think an entry point, a starting point, is a deeper understanding of integrity. So please do check out the integritycenter.com. Be very happy to hear from you. And, Tom, it's been a great pleasure. So thanks for inviting me.
It's been fantastic. We just put another message up there. We got this cool little chat going on with the New Zealand guy, and he just said there on the screen, "Congratulations, Dr. or Jeremy Chapman."
That's kind of you. Thank you.
Just fantastic that your voice is now out there. Let me just get this off the screen. And so everybody find that true passion and purpose, like you've seen Jeremy do. Live life with integrity, and the 4 words that I'll leave to honor you, my friend. These are leadership words. I write them down. They're not scripted. They come from the conversation. Number 1, integrity. Number 2, humility. Number 3, clarity. Number 4, wisdom. And so we'll see you again on the Quiet Warrior Show, everybody. And thank you, Jeremy, for being here. We're connected for life now as fellow Quiet Warriors.
Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
We're gonna take us offline. So